And welcome back to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Jan Shanez, and we have a very special guest. It is Robert Wilson, Fulham legend. He's on for this episode to do basically an in-depth interview, just like we did with Gordon. We are now doing with Rob. This should be fun. Giannis is going to be taking over the show once again, but before we do anything else, I want to first welcome back Giannis to the show. Giannis, this is your second interview, back-to-back weeks. Are you looking forward to this?
Absolutely. It takes me back to when I actually had hair on the top of my head, which actually, if I'd had hair, I probably would have lost hair in light of the season we just had. But
Yes.
It was wonderful doing the interview with Ivor and Robbo for this one. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
And I'm really curious to hear Robbo's views on a couple of things, a couple of questions that I got.
Okay, and if you are watching live, and if you're not, it's probably my fault because I scheduled this during the Euros, so that's a Goldman to start off the show. But if you're watching live, feel free to share a comment and a question for Rob, and we just might get to that at the end of the show. All right, but before we do anything else, obviously got to welcome Rob back to the show. Rob, thank you so much for doing this. Are you looking forward to it?
Yes, very much so. Good evening, Russ. Good evening, Giannis. Yeah, very much so. I did watch Gordon's episode last week. Yeah, were quite interesting. As I said off air, there was a few things I learned by watching his show. How he got scouted, how he got, how we ended up at Fulham. As players, right. And that I suppose when you welcome new players, you just expect them to come from the current club, or you don't know how they've got to that situation, and right. etc. So yeah, we're very interesting. So yeah, I'm sure mine will be just as good.
Okay, and I'm sure it will. But before we get going, I do have to mention this. We did learn one thing from Gordon's episode, Rob, because you did have a question for him, and he actually said that he actually did pay for a round.
Oh, did it? Well, I mustn't have been there that night, because I think he's never bought me a drink in 10 or 12 years I've worked with him.
Well, he told the story. He told the story about it. He told the story.
Just remember, he is Welsh as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Fans out there.
Yeah.
Okay. Very, very, very good. All right. Well, let's get going. I'm turning it over to Giannis. So, Giannis, it's all yours, my friend.
Well, Robbo, first and foremost, happy belated. I know you celebrated a very special birthday last week, and
on Saturday, the big 6-0. Yeah, it was soon come around. I don't feel like 60. Some mornings I do, but I did feel like that on Sunday morning after the Saturday alcohol intake. But
I bet you did. I bet you did.
And many best wishes from Fulham fans all around the world. It was quite touching, really.
Good stuff, and well deserved. Now, we've had 19 days since the Newcastle fun. And then when I interviewed Ivor last week, I talked about that we hadn't had the release lists yet from the club, but then they released them last Friday, which was great. Then there was some information sort of dribbling through about season tickets, which always gets on everybody's goat. But there's been basically the witness protection, radio silence from the ownership until Wednesday. And Shade Khan on Wednesday decided to, as he put it, pen a statement. He penned a statement about the upcoming season and what have you. And I was curious, because the social media response to his letter was swift, and it was sharp, and it was pretty negative. So I'm curious, Robbo, what your perspectives are on what transpired, or what has transpired since the end of the season, and where you believe we are right now. And let's not forget, I think we're 2 weeks away from the fixture list coming out. Yeah, 2 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the communication from Fulham is not the best at the best of times. We're very guarded with our, and rightly so, probably from within. Sometimes within our injuries throughout the season, that may be a club policy that they do try to keep that sort of information from the media and from fans going into games each week. So we've never been one for forthcoming with giving out information willy-nilly. But yeah, since the relegation day and no announcement as such as to Scott's position and Scott's uncertainty, I'm sure himself. I understand he's gone on a family holiday. He's back now. But, it must be, unless they have had words behind the scenes that's not come to light that we don't know nothing about, all the rumours this last sort of 6-7 days with linking in with Bournemouth, there may be some truth in that. We don't know, So it's disappointing. And obviously, then the top boss, Mr. Shade, comes out obviously with his statement, and as we alluded to just off air there, I mean, season tickets are going on sale. People are putting their money where their mouth is, and we really don't know who's going to be head honcho in terms of looking after the squad to try and get back up again. So it would be nice if some kind of statement come out, either Scott's staying or he's going. And as you say, we're 2 weeks away from probably getting the fixtures, and we're probably only 2 or 3 weeks away from the squad starting a pre-season again. You know what I mean? We've had the 4, 5, 6 weeks in another few weeks, and it's just a little bit uncertainty. We'll be no different than any other club out there, but as personal Fulham fans, we feel that we're hard done by, and we don't get the communication that we should do that comes through. So it's been typical Fulhamish, as I would say, in this capacity.
Do you think, Rob, though, and it is curious that there are a number of Premier League teams that are still looking for coaches, and I'm wondering if the ownership right now are looking hesitantly at what's happening above in terms of the difficulty the clubs are having getting coaches, about perhaps the need to maintain stability moving forward into the Championship season. It's great. It's always the sexy idea of, well, we can change our manager. But as we can see from other clubs, they're having real difficulties. There's a huge merry-go-round going in, and perhaps there's an argument there to maintain some sort of stability, even though a lot of fans are not, as we talked about off-air, they're not comfortable with Scott. It's split down the middle. But I wonder whether they're maybe mulling over just keeping it as the status quo moving forward into this year, and hence the lack of communication.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put my cards on the table. I want Scott to stay, and I'll stand by what I've said all season, and I've done for the last few seasons. I do stand by him. I just want some kind of a surety that the director of football, whether it's going to be Tony Khan or another, that the relationship that Scott will have with him on a day-to-day basis, whether it be in the UK or if he's still going to be American-based, if it is Tony, then that needs to be a lot smoother and a lot more in tangent of a DIOF and a manager of a head coach of a club in terms of what they're trying to do. So, I really do think if they've had words and they know that they're going to be head coach and director of football, the pair of them, then that should come out. If it's still a bit up in the air, as you say, because there's loads of manager merry-go-rounds and, that will filter down from Premiership down to Championship, then again, they may be just holding their cards, to see what's happening. But, I, for one, would want Scott to stay. And as I'm sure we'll allude to later on, if Russ divulges the poll stats, there's plenty of Fulham fans out there that are on the right side of Scott staying. But there needs to be some clarity how we're going to be changing, both in the way Scott deals with the day-to-day dealings with the DOF and his policy on being allowed to get players, buy players, rather than just get loan players to get us up and do the yo-yo, which we've done for up and down for the last sort of 3-4 years. So I think Scott is probably as frustrated as a Fulham fan or as a Fulham employee as the tens of thousands of us and around the country and the world that are in the same boat.
Well, I do have the results, guys, and here are the results of the poll. And the poll was, do you want Scott Parker to be the head coach of Fulham for the upcoming season? There were 746 votes. So this is a good amount of votes from the Fulham supporters. Yes was at 54%, Rob. No was at 46%.
Yeah. Doesn't surprise me in one way. I'm sure it may surprise a few, the Fulham fans that voted they don't want him, to say, well, why would the Fulham fans who do want him, what do they see in Scott to give him another opportunity to get us back into the Premiership, or at least stabilise the club, depending if we can get back up there that first this time round again, depending on the money investment he gets from the board. But yeah, that's nice stats, and I'm sure Scott, if he's listening, he'll be glad to listen to them stats anyway.
Yeah, you're always going to get. I mean, look, you're always going to get naysayers. I understand that, but if you look, I mean, you cast your mind back to when we had the Ranieri disaster, and then the yo-yo comment is just something you can't take back.
No.
It doesn't matter what you do. And I think that I'm sure that Scotty's head might have been turned here and there, but other clubs are struggling. And let's not forget, the umbrella, the parachute payments as well. I think that's a huge. You're going to see a real impact in our division this year with teams like Swansea City that's suddenly going to run out of money, and the pandemic has had huge effects on a lot of clubs, and we're actually in a very good position financially if we get it right because of the umbrella payments. And that in itself should be, I think, incentive enough to want to stick around if the ownership can provide him with the backing. But as you said, Robbo, they've got to give him the backing. They've got to get him a director of scouting. The director of football, well, that's another story for another day. And get it right and do it early, instead of sending out season ticket thingies and then those little snippets that we'll get in a week or two about, oh, the uniforms are coming in. The fans don't care. We want to know what's going on, because the season, before you know it, will be upon us. So it's
and we've been guilty over the last sort of 2 or 3 pre-seasons of, panic buying on the last day and getting 3, 4, 5 in and doing all our business late on as opposed to early on in the season.
Yeah. But on the bright side, I suppose maybe Jean-Michel Seri will play for us this year, but then maybe not. We can always pray the other way. Italy against Turkey today. So the Euros have started, Robbo. We're all sitting excited. England's first game is Sunday against Croatia. Chance to exact some revenge from the World Cup semis. Squad's been out. They picked 5 billion players. They've trimmed it down to 36 or whatever it is. Curious to know your thoughts on this squad, players that you might have had in, and how you think England might do in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Gareth again has done a fabulous job there over the last few years. He's blooded some youngsters of late, the likes of Foden and Sancho and Bellingham, and he's had Mount. He's gone through the under-21s for years, so he'll know a few of these players that have matured into first-team players now. On paper, yeah, I think we're very good going forward. I'm a bit worried about the defensive side of it. When you've got Tyrone Mings or Stones or, as your 2 centre-halves, or, Maguire if he's not going to be fit. And then you're having to play, I've heard on TalkSport today that they might be playing 3 at the back. It'll be Walker, right side centre-half, Stones, and then Luke Shaw, left side centre-half, and then play 2 wing-back. You're not going to win a Euros with them 3 players as your 3 defenders as such. You know what I mean? I know they may play that system for their clubs, but I think that's a bit different than playing against a West Brom or a Southampton when you're playing Croatia or even Scotland. It'll be a difficult game because of just the nature of the game. But on paper, I like the look of some of the forward-thinking players in Grealish and Foden, and Sterling needs to come to the forefront. He's had a poor back end of the season for Man City and was dropped. Rashford the same, I think, looked tired towards the end of the season. So I think there's enough in the locker going forward, but I just fear for us defensively. Fullbacks are not too bad, but I just think the 2 centre-halves or 3, whoever he plays in, whatever system he plays, would worry me. I think as the later you go in the tournament against the good teams.
It's interesting, Robbo, because Tyrone Mings had played 2 exhibition games last week and he was terrible. And when Trent Alexander-Arnold went down, there was a lot of suspicion about who was going to come up. One of the names was James Ward-Prowse, and James Ward-Prowse is the best dead ball hitter we've got in the country, I think. But Mings was so poor in those games that he brought in Ben White, and I don't think that's a bad idea. I actually think he's a very good player. But you're right. When you talk about Tyrone Mings, Harry Maguire scares the bejeevers out of me. I mean, he really does. It's like being chased by a lion down a high street.
And as good as Stones is on the ball, he's always got a mistake in him. I mean, he's cut him out a little. He's cut him out a little bit this season for Man City and had a little bit more consistency. But in 90 minutes, you're always going to have a chance with him.
Yeah. It is a little scary. I mean, I think it's a group we should come out of. I mean, I think I agree with you. I think Scotland's going to be tough. Croatia's going to be a cat and mouse one first game. The Czechs, I think we should be able to handle. But I'm wondering if we missed a trick with Ward-Prowse, because Ward-Prowse is really our modern 2021 Beckham. I mean, if he takes a free kick, you know where it's going to go. He takes a corner kick, the level of spin that he puts on the ball is just scary.
I like it. I mean, to be fair, I like the look. People like Mount. Mount's got that sort of up his locker as well. He's pretty technically good on corners, free kicks, and to be fair to him, and probably not a lot of England fans will probably see a lot of him. Calvin Phillips is technically very good as well, and in terms of striking a ball or free kicks, corners, he takes them all for Leeds. Obviously, whether he's going to get that mantle in an England side if he starts, then I wouldn't have thought. But when the likes of Grealish and Mount, we should have enough in there if we're relying on dead balls situations, whether it be free kicks, corners, or even penalties if Harry's not starting or injured or whatever. But yeah, he's a backup player that technically is very good, and sometimes teams take players like that as they do squad players just to have them there as a you may use them in some capacity in a game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. I'm looking forward to. I don't even know who the favourite's going to be. Many people are saying France, but I think even if you look at the weakest team on paper, North Macedonia, they're not a bad side by any means, and I think there are a lot of teams that could really surprise in this. It'll be a lot of fun.
I think with the current climate, the way the world football's gone the last 12 months, and the inconsistency and no fans and the longevity of playing and not really having a big break, it could affect a few of the fancied teams. They just may not be fit enough to see a tournament like this through. Because some of the teams like our league didn't really have a lot of rest last summer, so they've just played right through. So it'll be interesting. It's obviously the next 51 games throughout the next 4 or 5 weeks will. It'll be a nice fillip to have, because we missed out last summer on it.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Wall-to-wall soccer. Just loving it here. Even here in Canada, we've got Canada's just made the second round of the World Cup playoffs. They play their first game against Haiti tomorrow. They got a home and home. And if they win that, then they go to the Octagon, which is what they got for CONCACAF. So they'll have the US, Mexico, Costa Rica, Jamaica. So Canada's team actually has got the luxury of having this Alphonso Davies, who you've probably all heard of, plays for Bayern Munich, who's absolutely sensational. I'd say a version of Gareth Bale, and he's only 20, and very, very scary to watch. And so lots of wall-to-wall soccer. I'm going to take you back a few decades, Rob. You had 2 terms, like Ivy, you had 2 terms at the club. But I'd be curious to know, before you joined Fulham in '79, in terms of schoolboy, how did that look in terms of tryouts, and how did you get your big break with the club?
I signed apprentice in '77 when I was 16. I actually was on schoolboy forms with Fulham from the age of 14. Used to train at a school up in Putney, Con there somewhere. I can't remember the name of the school, but I actually got spotted playing for Sands United, which was my sort of under 11, under 12 team in Fulham. Played in Hurlingham Park there, going back many, many years, by Johnny Abley, God rest his soul. He was the manager. So yeah, that was my first route. I'd had a couple of trials with, I hate to say it, someone like Brentford when I was 12. I did have to grace their pitch when I was a 12-year-old playing in a couple of trial games. Not many Fulham fans will probably thank me for that, but yeah, once I got to 14 and signed for Fulham, then that was it. I was playing for London district schools. My secondary school was St Edmund's Catholic School in Hammersmith. And I was representing West London schools, and we had a very good team at that time. We had Clive Allen, we had Wally Downs, we had a lot of players that went on to Mark Lovell, who ended up being Fulham with me. We had lots of players in that group all made it to professional throughout the years, which was quite touching. So at 14, signing for Fulham was a schoolboy forms, trained once a week, played a few trial games, still represented my Sunday side, which is totally opposite of what academy football does now. And then it was quite interesting. It was getting to 6. I was doing my exams at school, and Fulham were going on an end-of-season tour with the youth team to Germany, to Ilversheim. And they offered me a place to go on that. And at that stage, I think it was around about the sort of April, maybe in Easter, something like that. And at that stage, I still hadn't had a yes or a no whether they were offering me an apprenticeship in that June, July of that summer. And I had obviously, I was going to miss some exams over it. So my mum told me I couldn't go, but then my dad, who obviously followed me all over the country in my career, said, right, well, you can go. You can do your exams at another time. Consequently, went to the tournament with Fulham youth team. Had a great tournament, stayed with German kids' families and all that. We won the tournament. And then I scored a hat-trick as well in one of the games. And then eventually when I got back, it was 2 weeks after we got back, I got a letter in the post to say that they were offering me an apprenticeship on July the 1st for 2 years. So it was a good decision by my dad to make sure that I did miss my RE exam and one of my English mocks. So it was a right decision. And I always wind my mum up even now. God bless her. She's 84. She still lives in Fulham. It was the best decision Dad ever made that day, making me go to that tournament. So went on to obviously start my career at Fulham as a 16-year-old. And in 77, we still had the likes of George Best and Rodney Marsh still on the books, So them 2 years of being an apprentice and round the changing rooms, around the training grounds of people like them was like a, not, I wouldn't say a comedy, but because of the media speculation of George and Rodney there every day, there was always something going on. So that was a 2-year learning experience of, looking up to some very well-established names, as well as probably youngsters like Tony Gale, who was a year, 18 months older than me, but he was obviously breaking into the first team at 16, 17 himself, So that was that was an eye opener. And then, as you say, 79 turning professional after my 2-year scholarship or apprenticeship, as they called it in them days. I managed to get offered a 2-year contract to become professional. Bobby Campbell was manager, and obviously in the January of the following year, in 1980, we were playing away at Blackburn in the FA Cup, and Howard Kendall was manager for Blackburn, and he pulled me aside the day before and says, "Rob, you're making your debut tomorrow." I said, "I want you to man mark Howard Kendall. Just follow him everywhere. He's their playmaker, and stop him playing." So we went to Blackburn and played in the game. Obviously, it was a cold, horrible day up there, and we drew 0-0. And obviously, I did my job because he didn't influence the game, and we'd gotten back to the Cottage. I think it was either the following week or the week after that. I didn't play in the second game at home, but I went on to have probably that season, probably another 14, 15 games. He dipped me in and out at certain stages before he eventually obviously got the sack and the change around of Malcolm coming in for, the season 80-81, going into to the next few years as no doubt we'll go on to talk about.
Yeah, and looking back, that really starting in 80 was that, I call it the golden period, because it really was that team was, I mean, you can rattle off the names. We can all rattle off the names. We still remember the Oscar kits. We still remember that 4-1 up at St James's Park. Just an incredible 6 years, and just the style of football we played, and we didn't get our share of luck as well, as we all know. How would you assess that first 6-year term at Fulham, especially under Malcolm McDonald?
Yeah, it was the best part of my career. I would say that the 4 years from 82, 83 season of accumulating in the Lincoln game for the fast game of the season, and I say going on to the following season and playing the type of football we did. I mean, again, Ray Arford, one of the best coaches I've ever worked with, God rest his soul. He was the first coach that I know of that time and that era to introduce what we call the diamond system. You would have Ray Lew at the pivot, I'd be at the top, and we'd have Sean O'Driscoll and Ray out under the. That's where Ray introduced that, and back in sort of early 80s, and obviously it's gone on to be a terminology that's probably used a lot more. Someone actually said to me yesterday, said, was there a false number 9 in your day, as Pep's just introduced? I said, no, that's a new Pep terminology, the false 9. So yeah, it was a great time to be, the football we played, the 1 and 2 touch, and the goals we scored, and the crowd started to come back. We were good on the eye. The team picked itself every week. You very rarely were, unless there was an injury, you could name our 11 every week. He kept it fairly fluid and solid. Did Malcolm and Ray, and obviously we had 2 really good years on the trot. Again, as much as the Lincoln game was a great game to be part of, the following season, the Derby game was the worst day of my life ever. So, I would say it's ups and downs in them two seasons. More ups and downs, but obviously we all would have wished the up to be a further up if the Derby game, because I'm sure if we'd have gone up to the Premiership or the First Division as it was them days with that squad, we would have graced our own, most definitely, because we gave the likes of Liverpool and other First Division sides that we'd played over that 2-year period. We gave them good games, and we were still fairly young, many of us, and we were still maturing, and there were no fear. When you pick up Ray Alton from West Ham, who went on to have a fantastic career, but Fulham set him on that journey. We're picking him up and giving him the opportunity to play week in, week out, which he flourished with. But yeah, the disappointing factor is that team would never have, they would never have looked out of sorts in the First Division that following season if we'd have done what we should have done. And I always say to Fulham fans, and when I talk to them on concourses all around the country, when I'm talking, they love talking about the old days. And when we blew it way before that, we should have wrapped it up before the Derby game. If we'd have got the point at home against Leicester or even beat them, we were 12 points clear with 6 games to go. You know what I mean? It was our own fault, whether it was a lack of, everyone talks about Dean Coney and the missed chances and Andy Thomas. And it was, we always felt that we could overcome it. But as the games we were running out of games. We just, you came to the Derby game with an ultimate sort of, you need to win and hope that results go your way the other way, and it just didn't mature. I mean, I remember scoring it against Sheffield Wednesday on the bank holiday, and then Mick Lyons scored in the last minute to equalise, and then we went to QPR on the bank holiday Monday on the plastic pitch. Ray Lou got sent off, and we got battered by him. We got played off the park, and then we played Carlisle at home, and had to win that to give ourselves a chance. So, yeah, there was lots of ups and downs. Obviously, lots of the games still bounce up on the Big Match Revisited on TV recently. Mm-hmm. I've seen a few on there that it's always heartbreaking to watch some of the games where you think, oh, if only, But listen, there were great times. I was a Fulham boy. To play for your local team has always been, high up there on my my list of honours to say that, yeah, I've represented my home side, and for that I'm very thankful that I'm still liked and still asked back, and because many have played for them and not. So I'm one of the very privileged few that do get rewarded with tickets, or if I asked for a ticket, it's never turned down, and I still have a rapport with many people who probably don't work there now, but I still see around over the years. So yeah, very good, thank you.
In '85, though, Robbo, you left, and it's funny because I'm looking at your career and Ivor's, and it mirrors you mirror each other in many ways. You both left the club for a couple of years, and you went to a couple of other clubs. You went to I believe you went to Luton, and then you went to Millwall.
No, I went to Millwall first, and then
Luton. Right. Now, what were the circumstances of your departure in '85?
Well, I think after the 83-84 season, obviously, the likes of Tony Gale went first. He went to West Ham, and then players started to drift where you could see players were coming to the end of their contracts, and obviously they got an opportunity. And to be fair, Fulham weren't the best paid players in them days. There was obviously in the 2 or 3 years that we'd all endured getting some publicity. There was plenty of clubs tapping on the door for many of the players, and it was a case of I think Ray Lou went to Sheffield United, Ray Alton went to Oxford. We were all leaving in and around the sort of same time. And I just thought at the time it was an opportunity to see, is the grass greener on the other side? And I did talk to a number of clubs, and obviously Millwall being one of them, George Graham. Although they had a very poor history with off the field, I liked the idea of working with a coach who I heard was very good, and consequently, when I did go there, I found out he was very, very good. But I only had one season there, and I scored 12 goals in 36 games. And George left at the end of that first season. I'd signed a 3-year contract, and he left and went to Arsenal. So left me I missed the last sort of 6 games with a hernia injury, and we had some characters in that team. We had John Fashanu, we had Teddy Sheringham came through. We sold Fash at the end of that season on deadline day. I think it must have been in March or April. We sold Fash to Wimbledon, and then Teddy came in at 18 to make his debut, an 18-year-old. And Razor Ruddock, who was there, Razor was an apprentice when I was there. They sold him to Tottenham as part of the deal. So yeah, there was some characters there, and like I say, it was an experience to not forget, both on the pitch and off it. And I were living in Berkshire, travelling around to Dartford every day to the training ground. It was like a 4-hour journey, 2 hours there, 2 hours back. And yeah, it wasn't the best experience of my life. And then unfortunately, the new manager came in, which was a Scottish guy called John Docherty. Some little Scotch guy. I won't swear on air, but and I think because I was on decent money, I was a top paid player there. Obviously, when I went from Fulham, I demanded quite a sizable wage for that type of year, that type of time. And he saw that I still had 2 years. I'd just scored 12 in 36 games. All right, I'd missed the last 5-6 of games. But he made it clear to me in pre-season that he wanted me out of the club for whatever reason, other than I thought it must be because he didn't like the way I played, or he didn't like the wage structure I was on. So he made my life hell for 4 or 5 weeks in pre-season, and he said that I'd feigned injury the last 6 games of that season, and so it was a love-hate relationship. So I couldn't even see him that side of the manager's office. He was that small. When you go in, I asked him to stand up, but so yeah. Ray Arthur had phoned me personally and said, "Oh, yeah, you're not happy, Rob." He said, "I'm at Luton, First Division. I'm assistant manager. John Moore had just taken over from David Pleat. Ray had gone there as first team coach. Me and Ray had got on very well." And he said, "Do you fancy coming?" I said, "Yeah, I'll definitely." And then obviously Crystal Palace as well. Stevie Coppell had been in touch, so I met both of them, met for talks and all that. And then I got the phone call from the doc and said, one of your old pals has done you a favour. We've agreed a fee. You can come and collect all your gear, and you can go and sign for Luton. So, it was all done in a few weeks, in first week, end week in August, going into the first week of September. But so yeah, it was nice to get away. I always say to Millwall fans, listen, I did my job. I scored 12 goals in 36 games for a centre midfield player. And I was their type of player because I did put my foot in as well. I wasn't, they liked that type of player that got stuck in at Millwall. So I actually got on well with most folk, off the pitch as well as on it. But it wasn't a very good experience for my family. My mum and dad didn't enjoy going there because, it was very intimidating, and we didn't lose many games at home, but the odd 1 or 2 that we might not have played as well, it was the abuse you'd get from the stand. Even if some guy was slagging me off one day and I wasn't even playing, I was down sitting behind the dugout, and my dad was with my brother up in the complimentary seats, and this guy was lambasting me. Obviously looked at the programme, saw number 8 Wilson. He lambasted me for so much in the first half. My dad followed him to the toilet half time, strung him up against the wall and said, "Listen," he said, "you don't know nothing about football. Robert Wilson ain't even playing. He's sitting 6 rows in front of you." So that was my dad and my brother's experience of dealing with a couple of the so-called Millwall heartaches. But yeah, so then going on to Luton, it was nice to go in the first division, going in some I was still fairly young there, going to some major players there in Brian Steen, Steve Foster, Mal Donaghy, Peter Nicholas, David Priest, God rest his soul, and Ricky Eel. So there were a real established team. Les Seeley in goal, again, God rest his soul. A couple have passed away in that team, and playing on a plastic pitch regular was I wouldn't say it was fun, but it was different. But we had a great season. I scored on my debut against Southampton, against Peter Shilton. I scored a header from the penalty spot, which was nice at home. And it was an enjoyable time. And the 18 months I had there went a little bit. I wouldn't say went a bit sour towards the reason I left in the end. I didn't fall out with Ray, because Ray ended up being manager as such the following season. He took over as manager, and he said, because the games I played, it was always me that got substituted. It was too easy for them to take me off rather than one of the so-called big boys. So it was the following season we played, it was Blackburn away, I think. And Mick Harford got sent off after about 10 minutes. So Ray had to took me off after 12 minutes, and Reece jogged the side. And so obviously you look forward to pre-season. So and then like said to me, he said, "Don't worry, Rob, you'll be playing on Tuesday." We're playing Southampton, I think, at home. Anyway, again, we played Southampton at home, and I think crowd were getting on his back a bit. We were drawing 0-0, and they wanted to bring on Mark Steen, I think it must have been. Anyway, I'd had it in my mind. I thought, well, if he takes me off again here tonight, all weekend I was livid. I thought, well, that's it. I'm going to lose my temper anyway. Unfortunately for me and for him, he did. When I saw I was wearing number 10 that game, and then when I saw the 10 come up, I just gave him the gesture that I shouldn't have done, and I just walked towards the tunnel. And then obviously the chairman weren't happy. The chairman had me in after the game, and had Ray in the next day and said, "Oh yeah, that was out of order what he did, and he's not going to play for the club again." Blah blah blah. And so it was a downward spiral with that. And I apologised to Ray, and to this day it was a silly mistake, but it was something that had built up all from the previous Saturday game, that I got substituted after 12 minutes, and and again I was the person taken off on the next home game when he was under a bit of pressure. But I did go on to play a few more games. He did ask me to play at Chelsea. There was one game where they had loads of injuries about 4 or 5 weeks later, and he stood by. He said, "Listen, Robert," he said, I need you to play at Chelsea. Will you play?" I said, "Yeah, I'll play, no problem." I said, "But don't get the sack over it, because the chairman said that I'm not going to play again." He said, "Oh no, I'll stand by my decision. If I want you to play, you'll play." Anyway, I played at Chelsea for him, and we drew 1-1. And again, I played well. I did all right. Ray didn't get the sack over that incident, which was good, because he went on to stay there. And then Ray Lou was obviously back at Fulham as player manager, and he got wind that there was a little bit of an incident, and there was a bit of unhappiness. And he rang me and said, "Do you want to come back?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." Obviously, Ray Lou was a personal friend as well as a teammate back previously, and then he had taken over the club in difficult circumstances. So I went back there the second time in September '87. For them 2 years then, when obviously Jimmy Hill was overseeing things. He was the chairman. Ray was player manager. So yeah, them next 2 seasons obviously ended up losing it. The following season, you'll probably remember, we lost to Bristol Rovers in the playoff semi-final. Did well away, and then we lost 4-1 at home. Scotty got sent off. So yeah, that was another disappointing part of the Fulham career. That we should have done better over them 2 games against Bristol to try and give us an opportunity to get into playoff final. But they always say it's never the same second time round, and I can vouch for that. And the circumstances were difficult, because the club was on its knees a little bit, and it was hard for Ray. There were a lot of things going on off the park. It was a very, as we all well know as supporters, there was a lot of unrest going off the scenes, and they did well to survive. But yeah, it was still another 2 years that I graced the Craven Cottage pitch, both at home and away, obviously for for me to get another 80 games in. I don't know what I played in them 2 years, but yeah, it was just another feather in my cap, really, to say I represented my home team.
234 appearances in total, Robbo, 42 goals.
Yeah. So it's nothing to be shift at. It was 234, and in this current climate would be good. With back in them days, it was it was hard to to make sure you got 30, 40 games a season in. You know what I mean? If especially the pitches we played on, as you well see, and I picked up an odd injury here and there, but most seasons I did get my fair quota of either games in, bookings, or goals. I don't know which came first in them days.
I think it would have been all even, to be honest. And it's funny you were talking about Kenilworth Road and the plastic pitch. Obviously, Loftus Road had it. Preston North End had it up at Deepdale. They had
Oldham,
pitch. Oldham Boundary Park. And for those fans listening and watching now, it wasn't like the modern day pitches, where the modern day artificial pitches are absolutely spectacular. It was carpet laid on top of concrete. So I mean, it was just
the ball. If a keeper kicked a ball and it bounced, it went 30 or 40 foot in the air. Easy.
Yeah, and it was rug burn and all that sort of stuff. I mean, luckily the game has evolved where the best artificial pitches really aren't too different from grass. But
no, yeah, very much so.
But at least next year we get the chance to bump into the Lions and the Hatters. We're going to be in the same division, and Luton had a decent season last year, and Millwall always a good battle. And I do remember the old Den. It was one of the most intimidating stadiums you could ever go in as a fan. It's Bermondsey, or it's Bermondsey Old Kent Road, and it's a very tough and poor area of London.
I went to watch Fulham. I went to watch Fulham there last season. The season before last. We got the train, me and my son, from London, and then got off and then walking through that. So it was a bit eerie walking around all of them streets. It's a blue collar area. And Millwall, they've had some very good players over their history, but it's a very, very intimidating place. Now you spent 89. You went up. I believe you went up to play for the Terriers, did you not? Up to Huddersfield? Did, yeah, Huddersfield Town, yeah. Owen Hand was manager, who was the Republic of Ireland manager when I represented under. Yeah, I played for the under-21s. He was in charge of the full squad at the time. Terry Conroy was under-21 manager, so I knew Owen briefly. I'd met him at a few get-together training squads through Republic. He contacted me, as did a few other clubs when I was out of contract. Ray Lou wanted me to sign. Obviously, the terms were that by them days Fulham were on their way out in terms of money and wages, and there were no signs of that improving at that stage. I got the opportunity to leave again in '89. Spoke to a few clubs and took the gamble of going to Huddersfield, to the Southerner going to the north. Came up to have a look round, stayed a day or two, looked round, met the chairman, Keith Longbottom, and met Owen and his staff. And Peter Whiff was assistant coach and playing. He was still playing. He was playing as well as first team coach. And then decided to sign. So that's when I went from being a Londoner to a Northerner now. I've been in the north probably 31 years and 29 in London, but people still say some people say my accent is Northern when I go to London, from ex-players or fans or friends of them. And then people up here think I'm still taught Londonish. And then there's an element of people who say that I sound Australian.
Oh God. That's where you'd have to say, look, mate, draw the line. I mean, not really.
Yeah.
Do I sound like a Roo? I don't think so. No, I mean, you can put up with
So going to the north was again an eye opener, because most of us Southerners don't go north of Watford is north. So, so to go up to Yorkshire was nice at the time, and it was a nice good 2 years. Again, there was a few players there that I knew. Chris Hutchins, who ex-Chelsea player, were there. Andy May were there, who I'd played against a few times. So they had a decent squad, and it was a quite a traditional club, very well, a lot of history behind the club, which excited me. And Owen had big plans. We had a fairly decent first season. And again, we missed out the following season by in the playoffs, just falling short again. Ended up staying up there as a Northerner. And then I finished my career the following season and went to Rotherham, where we won the fourth division, or got promoted from the fourth division. I played a few games for them. That was the end of the career, probably about 92, 93 season. That was when I finished it. And then I just did the non-league scene for a few years, and then started doing my coaching badges and ended up coaching at Huddersfield Town Academy for 7 years, doing various age groups. My son was obviously coming through then. He was under 10s. He was playing football for a local team, Emily, and then he got snapped up by Huddersfield, a school of excellence. It was at that stage. It wasn't an academy. So I sort of saw him right through till he got a scholarship himself at sort of 16. He got a 3-year scholarship then and went through to 19/20. So enjoyed the time working with the club and the kids. I did various age groups, started off at 12s and then worked my way up doing to sort of 14s, and then had a season doing under 16s as well. So doing all my coaching badges and UEFA B, and then went on to finish my UEFA A. I was just hoping that you might get a break in the game. In them days, it wasn't as easy to get a job. It was, unless you knew someone as a manager that you were going to try and get a full-time job somewhere, then that was always my dream. I thought I might get a coaching job somewhere, but it just never materialised. So, and I lost a bit of interest there. They sacked the academy director, who I was very friendly with, Jerry Murphy at Huddersfield. Mm-hmm. And I thought the club were wrong to do that. And so I stepped away from them. So I didn't carry on the following season. I thought it was a poor decision by them. And so I decided I didn't want to coach at Huddersfield. And I went and did a few years doing non-league at Brighouse Town and with Paul Quinn, who's now Tadcaster manager. And so just did the non-league circuit coaching and just keeping your hand in, really. And then my son was getting to the age where he was excited. He was always a Fulham fan, and he said, "Dad, I want to watch Fulham home and away. Can we get as many games in as we can?" Obviously, in the Championship, there's lots of northern games, so it was fairly easy for us. But many a home game, we've driven down, or we've gone on the train, early morning train to London and come back the same day, or stayed at my mum's in Fulham overnight and come back the next morning. So we've done many a season over the last 4 years. We would have done 30 plus games, both home and away.
Wow.
Even midweek ones, which especially when we were winning in the Championship, you want to just keep going and watching them. It was a little bit more difficult to watch them with any heart in the Premiership when we were getting battered most weeks the first season. But it was nice to visit a few grounds that he hadn't visited. There's a few that I'd played at. So, and again, that's one of the things I'm looking forward to this season, grounds that I've not been to for a very long time. So, and for him to, like many Fulham fans, there'll be lots of games they'll think, Blackpool or Coventry or Luton, you know what I mean? Grounds that they want to tick off their box that they've actually been to watch a Fulham game or a professional game. So, it's exciting as much as it was demoralising 4 weeks ago. I'm looking forward to having the fixtures out and seeing when they come out in a few weeks' time. You can plan your season really and plan your games.
Just out of interest, when you left Millwall, did you have any words to say to John Doherty, or as you left the door?
Nothing I could repeat on here.
I thought I'd ask that because I'm sure. I was thinking you might have played a Gazza prank on you because Gazza was always him and his pranks. Left him one of those, a couple of dead fish in the back of his car or something like that.
Yeah, I did have a bit of a Twitter spat with some Millwall fans last season, who were part of. They were a bit like a podcast, a bit similar to Russ's, but they were. I'd made a comment about.
I think I remember this. Yeah.
They made a comment about something, and then one fan, this guy who was in charge of the podcast, and that put something like, "Who's Robert Wilson? I've never heard of him." And I said, "Well, if you're in charge, if you're in charge of your show and you're associated with Millwall, I said, have a look at the season that I played there, only one season. See, tell me how many games I played and how many goals I scored. Anyway, he apologised later on Twitter and sent me private messages and said, "Oh, sorry, Rob, I didn't realise, I should have done my own work and all that," because he was sticking up for Doherty that he'd done well, which he did. A couple of years after I'd left, they got promotion and they went to the first division, and they had a bit like us, probably a one-season wonder up there. But so, yeah, no, it's not. I've got no gripe with Millwall. I enjoyed my time playing there. And I wouldn't say it was the best year of my life in terms of going to work every day and coming home with a smile on your face. It was great working under George and Theo, who went on to have a great career at Arsenal. I've seen George many a time since. I said, well, boss, why didn't you sign me at Millwall from Arsenal? You know what I mean? When you've just left me in the lurch there after signing a 3-year deal, you should have took me to Arsenal, will you? He said, Rob, I did think about it at one stage. He said, when I first went in there. And then I think he got people like Perry Groves in, and he had a few players. He had Paul Davis there. He had a few players that were just coming through, youngsters at that time. But no gripes about Millwall. But the Doc would probably get my volley's worth for whatever it's worth.
So I've got Russ. We've got. I know there's some questions in the comment.
We do.
So what I thought we could probably do is, I'm going to give you the same treatment as Ivor here. I'm going to give you some players, and you can just
here
give
we go.
The one sentence. What do you think, or how was it? And we had some fun with this last week. Some of them most fans will know, and a couple of them will be a little bit obscure that you might have a laugh about. So I've got 8 of them. So here's the first one. This guy we all love anyway, but Jerry Payton.
Yeah, fantastic bombhead, as we called him. He had the biggest head in football. Still keep in contact with him. He's working over in Japan. He's on a different type. We've got a Legends WhatsApp group. All the ex-players that are on it. In fact, Gordon's not on it. I don't know why he's not on it, but he should be on it. There's a number of players. There's about 20 of us are on it. And Jerry's on there, and he obviously, with Japan and the time zones and that, he usually replies back to messages the following day. But yeah, fantastic keeper. Brave as a lion as he was them days. You probably remember the Middlesbrough when he got his head cut open and Kevin Locke went in goal. Jerry was a very good shot stopper. Obviously went on to have a fantastic career with Republic of Ireland. At that time, we had youngsters like Jim Stannard, and obviously Perry had left and gone to Brighton, Perry Dickweed, but we'd had Jim coming through. But yeah, Bombhead, great guy, real nice, down-to-earth guy.
Sean O'Driscoll.
Noisy was a very good friend of mine. He was my roommate in Republic of Ireland. Very quiet. Went on to keep in touch with him still after football. And obviously, when he went coaching and managing, I remember going to Liverpool when he was working with Brendan a few seasons ago and met him in the Players' Bar and had a catch up with him then. But yeah, he was ungamely the way he went past players. Technically, not the most gifted. He'd come from non-league, from Alvechurch, but a workman-like, right-sided player that was pivotal in our team of them 2 or 3 good seasons we had. Very, very quiet, hence nickname Noisy.
The late, great Roger Brown.
Brownie was a legend. I used to travel in with him in a car. We all lived out in Wokingham, and he lived in Bracknell, and with me, him, and Gary Peters and Dale Tempest. We'd all come in the same car. He was a legend and a father figure I looked up to I was still a young kid. Obviously, when I broke into the team, he was a mountain, and the goals and the headers he scored, and the pictures of the Lincoln game, and the cigar and the blood, and if I showed you a picture of my wall now, this is my office. I've got all Fulham memorabilia all over it. So I look up there and I can see Brownie now on the balcony there. We're all there celebrating like that night of the Lincoln game. It's legendary, with a cup of tea in his hand and a cigar. But yeah, a no nonsense centre half that can head a ball probably 50 yards.
Yeah, he in the air he was that good. You're right. He was a monster. Now this is a bit more obscure. Peter O'Sullivan.
Sully, I thought the season, or probably 2 seasons, I don't know how many seasons he did stay with us. I think the first season, obviously, was the 82, 80, 81, 82 season. Yeah, he struck up a very good relationship with Les on the left-hand side. Very technically, very good. Was a dirty player. He put his foot in. He was quite nasty for as a winger goes. A nice guy. Got on all right with him, no problem. He were a good seasoned pro, even to youngsters like myself who were looking up to people like that you were playing alongside. He'd sort you out. He'd help you out. I think I probably only had 1 full season with him. I don't know what happened or the season after, whether he got left out by Malcolm and he drifted away from the game or went somewhere else. I can't remember, but yeah, I think he done a reasonable job for the time he was working with us.
Glenn Thomas.
God, Tomo, yeah. I mean, Tomo would have been a youngster even when I was a youngster going. He was probably more there in my second spell in 87. I think he might have come through and was on the peripheral playing a few games and probably did play a few games alongside him. You'd have to tell me. I'll stand corrected. But yeah, Tomo was a typical Essex flyby boy, he came in with all the Essex carload. Again, there was a carload of them, Jim Stannard and Paul Parker and all them. They all used to come in the same car. I mean, in the early days, it was Tony Mahoney and Stevie Atta. They were good lads, and they're all still on the group. Glenn's not on the group, but Stevie and Tony are, and Paul is, and quite a few of the Essex gang, Dean Coney, they're all still on there. So we do have some banter daily because I share a lot of stuff that might be on Facebook of Fulham related, and there's a guy on there that does the 80s memorabilia and puts on a lot of photos and that, and I'm for one always putting them on there so the lads see them, and they're forever grateful the amount of Fulham Fulham memories that they still can hold on to, and some of them obviously probably didn't have the longevity of playing for the club, so wouldn't associate it like I would as being my club, but even if they'd only had 1 or 2 seasons, so but yeah, we do have some banter on there.
I'll leave the best to last. Ivor.
Well, as I say, he was a legend and still is and always will be at Fulham. He was prolific goal scorer in them 2 or 3 years that I endured, played alongside him. I was probably I was good for him and he was good for me. The only disappointing thing that, if Dixie, me and him had probably scored a few more goals in the end of that season between us, or 1 more, 2 more, then we probably would have got ourselves over the line. And I always disagree with Fulham fans to say that Dixie cost us the game for that header against Leicester. I think they were wrong because I've seen the picture of it. I'm actually behind him when he's heading it 6 yards out. But, wrongly so, some Fulham fans say, oh, Dixie missed too many chances. But he was a great foil for Gordon, who was a legend. Obviously went on to have the career he did, even after leaving us a few times to, you don't go to Chelsea and Man City if you're not a good player, and he was just a prolific goal scorer, good at what he was good, very slow in the bar, as always last to the bar, so he'll get ripped to pieces about that, but I'm sure he knows that's the case.
I think he does, yeah.
Tony Gale was the worst at ripping him. Him and Strongley would probably give him a little bit more than I do. I probably rip him more now, 30 years later, than I did do when I was playing with him.
I hope he's watching this now. I'm waiting for a comment from him.
Yeah.
So Russ, do you want to take us through the comments thing from the
Absolutely.
Yeah, some great questions here for Rob.
Absolutely. Coming up next, we just have a few questions for Rob to end the show. Okay, Rob, let's get to it. I'll finish this off here. And Michael White actually asked for a shout out. So Michael, we're going to give you a shout out. Yes, you got a shout out. So we'll start there. Michael, you got a shout out. Okay. This is going to be one that actually involves all 3 of us. Okay. Robert, Russ, Giannis, if Scott goes, and it is a big if he does go, who would you want instead? Giannis, I'll start with you and then I'll go to Rob and then I'll share mine.
I'll be honest, if Scotty goes, I'll be mighty pissed.
Okay.
I'm with Rob on this one. I'm a huge Scotty fan, and he made a lot of mistakes this year, obviously, but he's a young coach, and this is how player. I mean, if you look at Robbo talking about, for example, his career, whether it's Robbo or Ivor, you start in your career at a certain point, 16, 17, and where you are at the end of your career is very, very different. And Scotty is just starting in his career, and we're hoping it's going to go 20, 25 years. And he's a self-reflective coach. So for me, he'll have gone on holiday and his head be doing this whizzing, and he'll come away as a better coach. I'll be fuming if he leaves, because that, I think, is a big loss, because it's better the devil you know. Who would I want? I mean, everybody's talking about Eddie Howe. We ain't getting Eddie Howe. Who are we kidding? We're not getting Eddie Howe. He's not taken Bournemouth up the Premier League to come to the champion. No, he's not. We're not getting Eddie Howe. Who would I want to get? Brian Clough, if he was still alive, but he's not, unfortunately. Rest his soul. It's funny. I actually like Nigel Clough as a coach. I actually think the setup we have at the Cottage and his emphasis on technical development, I think he'd be a very interesting fit in our club. But right now, I don't even want to look beyond Scotty, because I just fear what might come down the line.
Okay. Rob, what are your thoughts about this? We know that you agree with Giannis, but if that happened, who would you want?
I'm 100% behind Giannis, and as I've always stated, I'm a Scot lover, and I'd be absolutely devastated if he did leave us. And there's no need for him to leave it, because like Giannis has said, he's early in his career. He's a good up and coming young English coach. I'm privy to know a lot more that goes on behind the scene, and how he works with the players and how they enjoy in most times his style of management. Yes, and I agree totally with Giannis there that Scott needs to learn by his mistakes, and he has made plenty over the last 2 seasons. I think he learned a little bit this year, and I think from the previous year, and I think he'll have to learn a lot more again, obviously dropping back down into the Championship. But I think it's key that the people above him, or the person above him who he's going to work with, or the 2 people above him, obviously the director of football as well as director of recruitment, they're the 2 biggest key areas that any manager needs to have the trust.
Totally agree.
Trust to work with, and have a conversation on a Monday morning, a coffee in the training ground before they go out, and say, well, how do you think Saturday went? Or what was your overview? But you can't have that. And I've said this previously on one of the shows.
You did.
You can't have that when someone's working in America. You just can't. You can't have a Zoom call. It's not the same as seeing someone physically on a Monday morning to go in and talk about whatever you need to talk about, whether it's strategy, players, performances, etc., etc. So I wouldn't look no further. I mean, I've seen the Eddie Howe things, and like Giannis says, I don't think you're going to get linked with Celtic and not get that job. And unless he's that, brave that he wants to go back to where he started with Bournemouth and have a championship and see. But I wouldn't even contemplate naming another. I'd be detrimental, and it'd be undermining Scott's position.
Okay. And it's funny, when we did that show, Rob, you and Gordon really convinced me, because I was pretty much on Scott should go. And I still feel that way, except for this, and you convinced me on this. If you were to get someone in, like you had mentioned, if, I'm going to say it right now, if Tony Khan stepped aside and someone came in that he could talk to on a regular basis, this is what you guys talked about, and also brought in a director of scouting, when you have a unison team, then I would be all for Scott, because then he could actually grow as a manager, someone to bounce ideas off of. Then I'm for it. I would like Eddie Howe, but you guys are right on that I don't see that happening based on our situation. Why would you, if you're him, come to Fulham, honestly, unless things were really going to change? But I agree with you guys on Scott on this point. For me, it would have to be that someone would have to step aside, as you said, Rob, someone that's going to be there on a regular basis that he could talk to after each match and really review what's going on. I think he could really use someone like that. And along with a director of scouting, so for me, that's where I fall on that. Okay. Let's go ahead.
They're the 2 key areas. They're the 2 biggest decisions that Fulham need to make this season.
Absolutely.
It's not keeping Scott, because Scott's in a job and under contract.
Right.
The key is, are we going to make a decision? We need a director of recruitment, and are we going to address the director of football role to have a more football orientated person in charge?
I totally agree with that, because again, it's difficult because, you want this manager, we're talking about Parker, to grow. And as we talked about, we were suggesting Ray Lewington come on his staff, and I think that would be a help. But I also think someone that he could actually review, that would be, like you said, his boss, that he could review and just go over ideas on what happened and learn and really talk about each and every match, and really on a day-to-day basis. That's why I'm with you guys on that. Okay, let's move on. I believe Steve meant you, Rob, but I'm just going to say, do you think you should have scored more goals in your career?
I don't think I've done too bad. I think it's probably about 75-ish in my career. I mean, of whatever, 30-something at Fulham, but scored 12 or 30-something at Huddersfield. Probably 75 in whatever, just under 400 games for a midfield player in that day and age. I don't think I've done too bad there, Steve. But yeah, you can always do better. So yeah, I should have scored more.
Okay. All right, here we go with this one. This is also from Steve Reynolds, a friend of mine in Spain. Best manager, best player, and best game you played in with, etc.
The best manager, I would say, in terms of best manager, I would say would be George Graham. Even the one season I had with him, working with him at Millwall. The best coach I've ever worked with is Ray Harford. The best manager would probably be Malcolm McDonald, because we never used to see him. He was just let you do what you want. Monday to Friday, he'd turn up on a Friday, play five-a-sides, and that were it. Best game you played it, or best player I played. I always stick by. I know he was a teammate of mine, and he was a very good friend of mine. But I think the player that I enjoyed playing most with was Ray Houghton.
Okay,
because I saw him blossom from a reserve team player at West Ham to go and grace the field and score a goal against England for Republic of Ireland and represent Liverpool, Aston Villa, and have a fantastic career. You know what I mean? And it was great to. So I would say, but again, technically the best player when I was at Luton, Ricky Hill was the most skillful player I'd ever played with or alongside. A very nice player. Hardest player. Well, there were a few. Souness, when we played Liverpool a few times, gave me a tough time. And there used to be a lad at Portsmouth called Mick Kennedy. Again, God rest his soul, he's died. He done me over the top a few times. My only one sending off in my professional career was against Portsmouth on a Friday night, and it was down to him because he'd wound me up that much. And coming off at half time, he said, "I'm going to do you." So I said, "Right." Anyway, Ivor kicked off, knocked the ball to me, and I just knocked it a little bit too far in front. And I saw him coming at me, Kennedy. It was Friday night, we played Pompey, and I just went straight over the ball and took him out. I didn't even wait to see the red card. I started walking back towards the tunnel. Bobby Campbell was coming down the tunnel with a cup of tea in his hand. He said, "Where are you going, Willow?" I said, "Sorry, boss, I've just been sent off." Well, he hit the roof after the game and gave me a week's wages fine. We lost 1-0.
Oh, wow.
So that was my only sending off in my career.
Wow.
Right, yeah.
How about best game, Rob?
Best game? There'd be a few. Obviously, the Lincoln game was the best game in terms of drama and that for Fulham. I would say Newcastle is up there. What Yanis said, 4-1. The coverage that we got. That the Supermac team going back to Newcastle and being the.
I've actually seen the highlights of that. I actually watched the highlights of that. That's pretty fantastic.
Gordon and Ray both got 2 goals that were in goal of the season that year. Obviously Gordon's nice 1 and 2 touch football that we all were involved, and Ray got that great chip. So 2 of them goals were in the goal of the season or goal of the month for that season when we were. So that was a great game to be part of. Obviously, making my debut for Luton in the first division was nice. It's always a fillip to say that you have graced the Premiership, or the first as it was in them days. But listen, every game I represented Fulham, whether it be home or away, it was always a pleasure to be part of, whether it was good or bad.
Oh, that's great. That's great, Rob. All right, let's wrap this up. Giannis, any final thoughts before we leave?
Fantastic interview, Rob. You were absolutely brilliant. And I keep thinking about the John Doherty thing because I can imagine the reaction on your face. And it's sort of funny when you talk about John. I mean, John Fashanu was a beast.
Oh, he's really a legend. Was.
Yes. He was, yeah. And Teddy Sheringham. I mean, what a fantastic, because I think he wasn't up front. He established Teddy with Tony Cascarino.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, well, obviously, after I left that season, Tony came in and Teddy ended up. That's when they went on to have them good 2 or 3 years and won the championship and then went into Premiership. And they brought Terry Ehrlich in and Les Bryler. Yeah, they had some Keith Stevens, Rhino, who went on to be manager, play right back.
Yeah.
They had some stars of that day, and it's a club that's tarnished with some good history and some off the park, let's say, bad history, so, and it's never been no different, and probably, it's obviously slightly different now with the new ground than the old den, but yeah, it's a year that I always reflect on and don't mind talking about, but it wasn't the one year that I enjoyed. I wouldn't say enjoyed personally, because it was still a pleasure to play professional football. Then score 12 in 36 games is no mean feat,
It's a great,
but it wasn't one that you enjoyed going to work every day. And working with George was good. That was the only good thing. And it's just the 6 or 8 weeks tarnished it a bit. Working under John Doherty in that pre-season when he made it a little bit uncomfortable for me.
Millwall's an interesting club. I mean, because I used to, I did spend some of my formative years in Bermondsey. And it's a tough area. It's a really, really tough. And it's changed a little bit, but not too much. And Millwall supporters are reflective of that. They're a good old honest club.
They are. I mean, I would go down the Old Kent Road to a few pubs after a game and have a few drinks with supporters. They love you. They're the best supporters in the world when you're winning. You know what I mean? And they'll take you in, and you know what I mean. It was you were talking to a few characters in the pubs that I was visiting in them days.
Yes. Yes. No. It's Russ. It's an adventure. Let's put it that way.
I know you've told me. You've actually told me on several occasions about Millwall. You've told me about that. So that doesn't surprise me.
I had a very close, he's still a very close friend of mine, Edison, and he's a season ticket holder at Millwall, and he's Nigerian heritage. And you'd understand the angst around that when, some of the reputation of Millwall supporters. But Eddie's a really big boy, so you don't go near him, otherwise he'll squash you. But he used to tell me about some of the games when they had black players, and where the Millwall fans would turn on them. And it's such a shame because they've players like John Fashanu.
They turned on Fash when I was playing there. They would boo Fash, throw bananas on top of it,
yeah.
Everything.
It just
and that was our own players.
And these were good. These are good players. I mean, Fash was Fash. He and his brother. They were brilliant for Millwall because he was a typical Millwall battering type player. That's what they liked. And then he won an FA Cup with Wimbledon.
Yeah.
He won 88 with Vinnie Jones and the Crazy Gang. Good God, mad. Yeah. Mental lot. So no, it's been wonderful, Robbo. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Been great.
No, I need to find out more about Ivor and his spending habits because this isn't good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Listen. I don't think I'll ask him to buy a round in the new stadium bar when they open because I don't think you'll get change. I don't think you'll get change out of a tenner for the first pint.
Okay. Well, I love the two of you, but listen, great stuff, Rob. Thank you so much for doing this tonight.
No problem.
Okay. Well, we're going to wrap this.
Robbo. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rob.
Cheers. Thank you.
We're going to wrap this up for our very special guest, Rob Wilson, Fulham legend, and Giannis Giannakis. I'm Russ Coleman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk.